Spanish and English, or in sign language and in voice. She is recognized locally and throughout the world and the United States, sharing interactive stories and songs that capture the heart. Please give a warm welcome for Mama Edie Armstrong.
Can you all hear me without the microphone? No. No? Okay. Okay. I am going to begin with my song, which obviously I can't play this instrument and hold the microphone at the same time. So, but sometimes but then we'll be bumping into each other.
You don't need the mic.
But when I get to sing, even though I'm a quiet spoken person, sometimes I can get kind of big now. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me. Because I'm going to need to put the microphone down again in a minute. But it is my favorite welcome song. And I think that it's important for us to know how to help each other to feel welcome, yes? Because when we don't, then there are all kinds of feelings of insecurity and discomfort, and our minds end up being focused on things that they shouldn't really have to be focused on, right? And so we have a lot of things that are very important that our leaders are aware of, and that all of us need to be aware of. And we don't need to be worrying about somebody else's unfavorable opinion of us and who we are and what are you doing there and you don't belong. And so it's important for us to remember that our words have power, yes? And so what I want to do is ask you all to join me in singing that song. Do you think you can do that? Yes. All right, now say, come on, we can do it? We can do it. So we know we can. We know we can. All right, all you need is the words, right? And in this part of the song that comes from West Africa, there are really only 3 words. And the first word is funga. Can you say funga? Funga. And funga is one of those words that, you know, over the years and across the seas has kind of gotten shifted and changed, and we're not exactly sure what it means or which culture it comes from, but we know that it has to do with welcoming. So those of us who use this song typically interpret it as meaning I welcome you into my heart. Such a wonderful way to greet someone, don't you think? Yes. A lot more special than looking at somebody and saying hi. What is that, hi? But tell someone that they've got a special place in your heart. That's very sweet. The second word is alafia. Please say alafia.
Alafia.
Alafia, we know for sure, comes from the Yoruba people of Nigeria who speak the Yoruba language. And alafia means may the peace of God be with you. Also very sweet. And the third word is ashe. Can you please say ashe? Ashe. Ashe. And ashe is an affirmation. It's kind of like saying amen. Or it's like affirming that there's power in what we said. And as a matter of fact, I'm one of the co-founders of our local storytelling organization called ASHE, the Chicago Association of Black Storytellers, which is the local affiliate for the National Association of Black Storytellers based in Baltimore, Maryland. And during this time, especially during Women's History Month, many of us are giving special honor to one of our two co-founders for the national organization who passed away a few years ago. Her name is Mother Mary Carter Smith. And so with your indulgence, this performance is dedicated in part to her memory. So, now that we know the words, Funga, Alafia, Ashe, Ashe, Funga, Alafia, Ashe. George, I think they caught it. Okay, so the way we'll do it is that I'll sing a line in, you sing a line in, I'll sing a line in, you sing a line in, now. Oh, you got it. Okay, here we go. All right. I'm sorry, I gotta put this down. Your turn. All right. Now, let me see if you can tap hand, tap hand, tap hand, tap hand, tap hand, to the sound of the stage. It's called shekere. Can you say shekere? Shekere. And it too is a Yoruba term from the Yoruba people from Nigeria who are credited often with the development of this instrument, which is basically a gourd, cousin to the pumpkin and squash. And they have a very intricate way of kind of macrameing these beads around it. So most of those of us who play the instrument also make this instrument. So this one was made by one of my sisters who has performed with Spiritual Journey Percussion Ensemble, and now we perform with the Drum Divas, and we make our own instruments, and that's really cool. And helps us to feel connected with the instruments. And anybody who plays, how many of you guys play an instrument? Any kind of instrument, piano, anything. Don't you feel sometimes that that instrument is an extension of yourself and who you are? Well, if you haven't gotten there yet, look out! It's just a wonderful thing. Well, when we talk about the power of our words, and as we celebrate our leaders and students who are leaders on the way, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing, we keep in mind that effective leaders and leaders who come to be well loved are those who understand the power of our words, yes? And not only do they shine as stars, as you say in your theme of shining stars, building our future, but they know how to bring the star quality out of those who they lead, yes? And it's a wonderful thing. But anybody who's ever been a leader knows that, who was that? Langston Hughes said, you know, life for me ain't always been no crystal stair. So leaders know that there are many things that they must confront and deal with. And leaders know that many influences come to them, sometimes in the form of angels, and sometimes in the form of demons. Well, when I think about angels, I think about people like my sister over there. Deanna, give my sister a hand. I think about my mom, Christine May Smith McLeod, who had rheumatoid arthritis, and because of when I was born to a family with children who were a lot older than I never really got to see her walk unaided. She was a shining star in my eyes. This was a woman who knew how to run a household and raise 4 children from her hospital bed. But with the assistance and support of my father, Maxwell Augustine McLeod, who was a man who had staying power. Now, we all been on the planet for a minute. Even the young folk, younger folk, I mean, we all young at heart, I know. Understand that with a circumstance like that, how many men do you know who would have stayed until they were married for 47 years, until my mother passed away? My dad had staying power, and God bless him for it. Now, he had his demons sometimes too. But if I was in a situation like he was in, I bet I'd have my demons as well. And so it's all good. I think my father did the very best that he could do in the circumstances, and he was a shining star for me as well. Well, when I think about demons, sometimes I even think about the demons inside myself. And I'm a pretty quiet, and I was raised as a shy child. And a lot of times people who know me as a storyteller, and they hear me talking and talking and talking and talking and talking and talking, and say, no way. No way you were shy. But I was. And in fact, I was shy to the point where I didn't advocate for myself. Everything was, oh, Edith, can I get in front of you? And I'm like, okay. Oh, Edith, can I have some of your popsicles? Okay, yeah. Oh, Edith, can you get this for me? All right. Well, see, all that had to change. It happened gradually, of course. And what's funny, though, is that sometimes I would even advocate for my friends more so than I would advocate for myself. It was just hard for me to see injustice and not do something about it. But I was patient when it came to me. So I had to learn that it's great to stand up for somebody else, but it's also pretty cool to stand up for yourself. Well, enter Stephen White. I was about 11, 12 years old, and I had gone to St. Carthage Catholic Elementary School in Inglewood. This was in the 70s, late 50s. And this was on a cold day. Not quite so much like today. Today it almost feels like a tropical breeze by comparison to what we've had. But there was snow blanketing the ground, very much like it is today. And the sun was shining. It was a beautiful day, but I had a headache. I had started getting migraines at this time. And I had a really bad headache. But I was on my way home from school for lunch. And Stephen, who called himself liking me, well, now you know what liking a girl can translate into for a little boy 11, 12 years old, means you're chasing after them, pulling their pigtails and so many things. And so he started chasing after me. And I said, Stephen, leave me alone, I got a headache. And then he kept chasing after me until finally he started throwing snowballs at me. Well, they all came below my chest and what have you, so it didn't really hurt. I knew he wasn't trying to hurt me. He was just trying to get my attention. I'm like, there are other ways. Talk to me. You know, he was cute, but he was getting on my nerves. So the cute didn't matter anymore because he was acting like he didn't have good sense. So anyway, so he's chasing me, and I started to try to chase him, but I was like, he's moving too fast and I don't feel well. And so finally, he was just so confident that I wasn't going to get him and he was going to be able to get away with just continuing to get on my nerves that he slumped into a very careless posture of turning his back on me. I came along quietly behind him, and I ran and I pounced on his back, and I threw him down in the snow, and I started pummeling him in his back, and I was like, I told you to leave me alone. I got a headache. I told you to leave me alone. Well, by the time I collected myself, I looked around and noticed that our friends had started coming out of the building, and they came along and they were laughing, oh, Steve, man, you let a girl beat you up. So I'm sure that he was more embarrassed than anything else. But eventually I allowed him to rise. And when he got up after that, he left me alone. That was the first experience that I can remember vividly and really advocating for myself, really standing up for myself. And those kinds of times evolved to address other situations. Around the time that I was 13 years old, so many things were going on in the United States. Most of you will recall that Chicago had a reputation of being the most segregated city in the world. And so there was a policy that I believe was unwritten called redlining. So there were certain communities that some of us were simply not allowed to live in. And so at that time, Dr. Martin Luther King decided, no, this is not right. We need to march against this. Well, so they had a march in Marquette Park. Any of you familiar with Marquette Park? Well, the nuns at our school, now this was a community that from the time that we moved in, when we moved in, it was predominantly white. And eventually, most of European Americans moved away. So the school changed over the years. So by the time I started there in second grade, and then graduated in 8th grade, it was of a very different complexion, if you will. And the nuns sometimes really didn't make any bones about the fact that we weren't wanted there. They wouldn't have sung that song, Funga Lafia, to many of us. And at first, when we first came to school there, they gave favorable treatment to the white children as compared to the black and Latino children. And then once most of the white children were gone, then they favored the light complexion black children over the dark complexion black children. And as a child, you start to notice these things. And you say, well, what's up with that? But there were some nuns, on the other hand, who were very kind and loved us just because we were children. And they got times for us to go to CYC meetings, and it's like a Catholic Youth Club or something like that. And so they arranged for us to actually meet with a group of children who lived in Marquette Park. And so we went over there, and it was all white school, with our school at this point practically being all black. And we sat down and we talked about what is this craziness? What is this racism? And why are your families afraid that we're going to move into your neighborhood? And my daddy don't want your daddy's job. My daddy don't even know how to do what your daddy does. I mean, you know, he's got a job that he's very comfortable with. Why can't we be friends? Why can't we play together? Why can't we swim in your swimming pool? Well, later on was when Dr. King organized the march through Marquette Park, and I was there. Talk about demons. That was the first time I looked into the face of hate. I'm 13 years old, and we were at home having our little breakfasts and packing up our lunches and what have you, and our parents were saying things. I remember my mother saying, okay, now do you have your lunch? And I'm like, yes, ma'am. Oh, okay, now do you have a little piece of change? I gave you a little piece of change. You got a little piece of change? Yes, ma'am. Okay, now you know your phone number. I mean, I know you're old enough that don't forget, if you have an emergency, you call. Yes, ma'am. Now, do you have everything you need? Yes, ma'am. And I mean, I had so many yes ma'ams going on. Now do what the nuns tell you to do, and make sure you don't look into the eyes of any of those people, because many of them are going to be angry. They're going to be angry that you're there. If anything happens and you start getting scared, stay close to the nuns. They'll protect you. Yes, ma'am. So we loaded up on the buses and trusted to the nuns, practically all white nuns with an all-black congregation of school children. And we went to Margate Park. And at first, when we were on the bus, we were just kind of chattering and what have you. We were excited, but it was kind of like a scared excited. You ever been scared excited? I never had that feeling before. And then, as we got closer though, the excitement kind of ebbed and the scare kind of rose back up, because we started hearing the sounds from the streets. There were other buses that had already arrived, and the people from the community were already out in the streets, and we could hear them screaming and hollering, "Go back to Africa! What do you want to come into our neighborhoods for? You don't belong here, you're not even American!" And I wasn't sure suddenly if I wanted to stay on the bus or get off. But it was time to stand up. And so we got off the bus, and we were so scared that hardly anybody was saying anything. And so as we went clustered closely together down the streets to look into those faces, as a child of 13, there was a woman who came up to me. She had to have been maybe about this tall to me, but she was obviously a mom. And so when people approached me, I would just naturally look at them and say hello. So she came up to me and she looked at me. And I remember what my mother said about not looking in their eyes because they might be angry, but she didn't. I wasn't quite sure what she looked like because I had never seen that expression on her face before. And so I looked at her and I said, hello. All of a sudden, she started lashing out at me. She cursed me. She called me all kinds of terrible, filthy things. And I was stunned. I was shocked. It hurt my feelings. I wasn't quite sure what to feel. And then a little boy, who I imagine was her son, he looked to be maybe about 9 years old, he was standing there beside her. He started cursing me out too, telling me I should go back to Africa. I'd never been to Africa. I was 12, 13 years old. What did I know? So that was the first time that I looked into the face of hate. Little did I know that some 30 years later, I would meet another storyteller by the name of Sue O'Halloran. And we'd be sitting in her car in Madison, Wisconsin during a storytelling conference and talking about race relations and the things that burdened our hearts and how we use story to bring a different kind of consciousness to people. And she all of a sudden started telling me, you know, I remember when I was about 13 or so, I lived on the far southwest side of the city in a community called Ashburn Park. And I remember my parents, I remember overhearing them saying things like, you know, they're coming into our neighborhoods and they're coming to get our jobs and they're coming to do this and that. And she said, I kept wondering who they were. Who was she talking about? Who were they talking about? And so eventually she came to learn. And then when the time came for the march at Marquette Park, she said that she went to her living room window and she looked out into the streets. And the streets that were normally filled with children outside playing and everything, there was nobody on the streets. Everything was quiet. And her mother told her to get away from the window. She didn't know why, but she got away from the window. But then she wondered, she knew that something was happening in Marquette Park, and they had relatives who lived there, and they had friends who lived there. And she said she wondered at that time what was going on. And I told her, I said, you know, if I had known you then, I could have told you. She said, what do you mean? I said, I was there. She said, oh my God. Both of us sat up there and began to cry. And we hugged each other. And we talked some more, and we've been friends ever since. Well, demons come in all forms, don't they? But, you know, demons, they're not, you know, people talk about good experiences and bad experiences and positive and negative experiences. I think they're just all experiences. They can all teach us something, yes? We can get something from everything. I often say that a blessing is not always convenient, nor does it always feel good, but it's a blessing nonetheless. And so I learned some things that day when I was in Marquette Park. I learned what it meant to stand up for something that's important, to stand up for justice. And that's what those of you who are here, who are leaders, that's what you do. You stand up for the justice that we need to have so that our children can have the kind of quality education that they deserve. And it's a wonderful thing, so I'd like for you all to applaud yourselves for it. You know, sometimes our rituals can get us through a tough time. There's all kinds of rituals. I remember I was doing a workshop one time introducing Kwanzaa to a particular group of people, and this African-American holiday that celebrated for 7 days. I had my candles, my 7 candles set up in my Kanara, and had my little fruits and what have you on the table, and a woman came in, an African-American woman came in, and she's saying hello to her friend. She looks over and she sees my table, she sees the candles and what have you. She said, oh no, honey, I ain't dealing with that voodoo stuff, I was like, okay, I got me one today. So anyway, thankfully, by the time I got through explaining that, you know, people hear the word rituals and I think all of a sudden they start picturing, you know, chickens and, you know, what have you. And when you don't understand something, you tend to be afraid of it. Unfortunately, a lot of people, when they haven't understood something, not only would they become afraid of it, they try to destroy it. It's like if you don't understand it, you can't control it, right? If you can't control it, it's out of here. So they destroy it. Cultures, entire civilizations have been destroyed that way. But when that woman sat down and I got to talking about rituals and talking about how shaking somebody's hand is a ritual, come on, right? What is a ritual other than something that you repetitively do? And we you know, many people celebrate Christmas, we celebrate Hanukkah, we celebrate Eid al-Fitr and Diwali, we celebrate whatever we celebrate. Those are their rituals within them. But sometimes we get to celebrating or using our rituals so habitually that either we never learned the meaning or the meaning's been lost. So in that particular gathering, I asked the people, I said, you know, to help us get a better handle on rituals, let me ask, I said I was raised Roman Catholic, so that's what I know best. Let me ask, how many of you were raised Roman Catholic? Well, there was a father in the group. Okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah, now I'll ask now, how many of you were raised Roman Catholic? Okay, don't be ashamed. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. You know how you go to church and the little holy water's over there on the side, you dip your fingers in the holy water, make the sign of the cross, and go on in, you genuflect, and, you know, say how to do to the Lord, right? I'd like to ask you, does anybody have an idea? Are there any particular thoughts that either come to your mind now or go back to when you were a child? What was in your mind as a child when you went into the church, you dipped your fingers in the holy water, maybe signed the cross and went in and genuflected and said hello to the Lord? What was in your mind? Anything in particular? Or was it just something that you were taught to do? Anybody? We just get one response or so. Yes?
We were told that you had goodness in your mind and in your heart.
You were told what? I'm
That
sorry.
we have goodness in our mind, in our hearts, and to everyone on either side of us.
Ah, okay, that's very nice. That's very nice. I haven't heard that. But that's very nice, and I'm glad you did. And I'm sure other people probably heard things. What did you hear?
It was a way to greet the Lord and bring your mind into what was going on in the church.
Okay.
Even as a child, because I too was taught by you.
Right, okay, okay. So then when you put your fingers on the shoulders, was just touching the shoulders of the Lord? I mean, did that have any particular significance? Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So Holy was over there and Spirit was over here. I'm just joshing. Well, there's so many ways that we can look at rituals, right? And there's no one particular thing that says that it should bring meaning for you. But I asked this man at the time, I said, I asked him, I said, do you remember going into church and going through that? He said, yeah, I remember. I said, well, do you remember what was on your mind when you went through those gestures? And he said, yeah. I said, well, you want to expound on that? He said, I remember thinking, I wish my mama hadn't made me get up to go to Mass that day. And of course, everybody laughed. And I said, well, let me ask you this. If you had gone in there and as you dipped your fingers into that water, you thought for just a moment about the cooling, refreshing qualities of water, about the fact that water is life-sustaining, and you thought about the blessing that water is, and if as you placed it on your head, you said, just for a few seconds, Father, bless my mind, so that I can have the thoughts that you would have me to have, like what you were saying, that will guide my actions. Bless my heart, so that I'll know compassion and love. Bless my shoulders, so that whatever burdens you lay upon me, I'll be able to carry them, knowing that you'll be beside me, in front of me, and behind me. Do you think it might have made a difference for you to go through that ritual? He said, yeah, I think it might have. And so, by the time we were done with all of this, of course, the woman who came in talking about voodoo stuff, she was like, okay, I got you. I got you. And when you talk about the principles of Kwanzaa, unity, umoja, kujichagulia, self-determination, ujima, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, ujamaa, nia, purpose, imani, faith, faith, and kuumba, creativity. She said that it was against her religion to celebrate something like that. Now I think that if it's against your religion to honor yourself, there's something wrong with that religion. And if your religion teaches against unity and self-determination and people doing things together to make life easier, I don't know about y'all, but it seemed like it might be time to kind of look around for something else. But you know, rituals had a special meaning for me. I used to enjoy going to Mass, and in those days we had the Latin High Mass, and I loved singing in Latin. For one thing, I didn't know how to speak anything else, so I thought it was really cool to be able to speak in another language. And I loved the smell of the incense and the sound of the bells ringing, and I loved feeling close to God. Well, this one particular day was a Sunday, and I would have gone to church, but I wasn't really feeling well. I decided I was going to have Mass anyway, in my bedroom. Yes, it did. And so I was, again, that was a lot happening for me around 11 or 12. I think this was around that same age. So my mom was asleep over on the other side of the closet from our room. And so, and my sister at this point, I think, had gone to Xavier in New Orleans. And so I was in the room alone, but if I woke up and my mom heard me tipping through the hall, she'd say, Edith, Edith, this day in my bedroom, I decided I was going to have Mass because I just needed to have Mass. And so I had my missal already, and I was responsible for setting the table for my mom. Every month the priest would come and give her confession and give her communion. And so I knew everything that needed to be there, had my little rosary, had my little holy water, had everything. But then I said, well, I need communion. So in those days we were eating white bread. And you know, white bread, you know, it tends to be kind of flimsy, right? Very malleable. So I decided I could make me a host. So I tiptoed into the kitchen. And I quietly got a piece of bread, took the ball of my hand and mashed it into the bread, took a butter knife, cut a little round circle. Child, I had me a host. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Then I said, well, now I need some wine. Well, no, it wasn't like that. We used to enjoy Welch's grape juice. In fact, I still enjoy Welch's grape juice. So we had some Welch's grape juice. I said, aha! Ow, that would be my wine. And so I got my dad's shot glass that he used for his liquor. It was about that big. Wasn't exactly what I call a holy vessel. But I said, this will do. Got Daddy's shot glass for his bourbon. Poured me some Welch's grape juice in there. Had me some wine, yes I did. So I had me a host and some wine. Put it on a pretty little plate. You know, one of those pretty pink, transparent plates with the cut glass and whatnot. I used to love those plates. Put that, made it look real pretty. I wanted it to look nice for the Lord. Went on tiptoe back in my bedroom. I had Mass, did the whole thing. I went from top to, I was the priest, I was the altar boy. They didn't have altar girls in those days. And I was the congregant. And I think that maybe that experience must have opened a portal in my bedroom to the other side. Because one morning, I woke up to the sound of somebody calling my name, Edie. Edie. And I was like, who's that calling my name? I must be dreaming. So I continued to sleep and I heard it again, Edie. And when I opened my eyes, there at the foot of the bed, beside the doorway, just around the wall where you would walk in, I thought I saw my grandmother standing there. The thing is, my grandmother died when my mother was only 14. And I looked, and I couldn't believe it. And so I threw the cover over my head, and then I pulled it back down, and she was still there. And she just smiled at me very softly. And then she turned and walked away. So while I was lying there, I was like, wow, what just happened? Well, when I started collecting myself, I said, well, let me check the time. And I looked at the clock, and it was 7 o'clock, the time I needed to get up. And I would normally set the alarm. I set the alarm, but I had forgotten to pull the stem out. My grandmother came and woke me up. And it was as though she came to say to me, I love you, I'm here for you, I will always be here for you, I'll be here to protect you. So she became one of my angels at that time. And the strength and the love of people like my grandmother helped me to deal with the demons who were there. And even the demons within me, like the one that pounced on little Stephen White back all those years. And so I suggest to all of you that when we find ourselves encountering people and forces that don't feel so good, rather than to get angry and all discombobulated, just take a moment, take a deep breath and say, okay, there's got to be a blessing here somewhere. And sometimes when you're lucky, you might find it. And so I encourage you all to recognize that we all are made of star stuff, yes? And so in using the power of our words, let's remember that our words are intended for us to lift each other up, not to tear each other down. And in so doing, we will all rise. So I leave you with this. Arise and shine. Beautiful people, arise. Arise in the light of God's wisdom. Beautiful people, arise. Your time has come. Beautiful people, take flight. You're free as your ancestors' vision. Go back to your old-time religion. Shine in the light of God's wisdom. Beautiful people, arise. Beautiful people, arise. Beautiful people, arise. Thank you.
Storyteller, she's the one. You have a brochure on the table, and you can give her, email her, or call her. Now we're going to continue. Let's give her another hand.